So, what are the top reasons that people binge eat?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And honestly, there's not one straight answer. Binge eating is sort of a, I want to call it a recipe. There's a lot that goes into it. But the top reasons that I've found in my practice are number one, um, backlash from dieting. So that is when people decide that they need to go on a specific diet. Like maybe what's popular now is like no carbohydrates, or in the past it was like a 1,200 calorie a day diet, or a no fat diet, or a no sugar diet. There's a few things that might happen. Number one, they just might feel so hungry from restricting themselves that their body just takes over and goes and gets everything that they possibly can without them even noticing. Like if they're tired and their willpower gets weak, right? They're saying to themselves, "Well, I've been holding on all day and I've been resisting all of these urges, and now I'm going to go and eat everything I want." Because I'm too tired to not. I'm too tired to hold on anymore. That's part of it. The other part of it is the black and white thinking, the paradoxical thinking, we call it. So let's say that you decide that you're going on a no sugar, no carb diet, and then you wind up accidentally eating an apple. Like the non-diet or non-binge eater wouldn't think anything of that. Oh, it's an apple. But somebody who has this sort of personality and set themselves up to be perfect will say, oh, well, I've ruined the whole day. I might as well eat lots of candy and cakes and bread and all of these things. So then and tomorrow is another day. So I won't binge tomorrow, or I won't eat any carbohydrates tomorrow. So it's the black and white thinking. The other part about it is that we're sort of biologically predisposed to binge. If you think about it, our ancestors were feast and famine, right? They'd walk around all day and look for food, and they'd hunt and gather, and they might not have eaten in a day or two, and then they come across a lion carcass. They bring it back to their cave, and everybody eats it. Everybody eats and eats and eats until they're full, and then they go several days without eating. We don't have that issue anymore because food is plentiful, but we still have these. I mean, we were still built that way. We're still biologically predisposed to binge. So if we are restricting our food, those urges are going to kick in and we're going to go and binge. So that's backlash from dieting is number one. Number two is binge eating to numb oneself. Food and eating is a behavior that can be very soothing for many reasons. I mean, first off, when you're eating, you don't have to think about anything else. Um, Second off, there is a chemical reaction that happens when you're binging, especially on things like bread, sugar, cakes, candy, that kind of thing, because you're getting a serotonin boost, you're releasing dopamine in your brain, and you're sort of calming down. So a lot of people who find themselves anxious will use binge eating to calm themselves down. And it can be super helpful actually in the moment, right? But afterwards, the word ego dystonic, it makes them feel, it interrupts their life. It makes them feel terrible. So that's the other part of it. The next thing I want to think about is abuse. And I see that a lot in women who have been abused, and men as well. So the food is something that keeps them feeling safe. It's something that is consistent that they can always go to. And I don't necessarily even mean just like sexual abuse or physical abuse. There's also parents who were neglectful or passive aggressive or inconsistent or angry, right? Food is consistent, it will always make you feel the same way. So you might be feeling nervous, or you might have had an interaction with somebody that triggered all of your childhood stuff of being rejected. You go to the food and it's consistent. Again, you get this safety that you didn't have before. So it's sort of holding, it gives you this, it's like a warm blanket over you. So there are reasons that people do it to kind of self-regulate and to keep themselves calm. It's a coping mechanism. The next reason that I've seen people binge eating is depression. So the food is, again, I almost want to say like a warm blanket. I see a lot of people getting into bed with big bags of snacks, pints of ice cream. That's sort of like that's even the stereotype, right? Like a woman breaks up with somebody or she gets her heart broken and she crawls into bed with a pint of ice cream. So food is again very comforting and holding and warming in a way. It makes one feel not so alone. And depression is this feeling of just being totally disconnected. And when you're eating, you have something to connect to. You're sitting there and you're connecting with not just the food, but the act of chewing, the act of tasting, the act of digesting. It gives you company in a way. Okay, so the next reason that people binge eat that I see a lot is overstimulation. And that's sort of more like a problem of society, right? I mean, food used to be more difficult to come by. And I don't mean, 1,000 years ago. I mean like when our parents were kids and where I grew up in New York City, my grandma, if she wanted to get food for my mom, if she wanted to get fish, she had to go to the fishmonger. If she wanted to get meat, she had to go to the butcher. If she wanted to get bread, she had to go to the bakery. And there wasn't a lot of money, and the food was also, it was fresh. And especially here in the United States, it's not like that. I mean, you go to one supermarket and you get all your food, and you don't have to cut up your fish. You don't have to get the butcher to cut up your meat. You go and you buy a meal that is prepackaged, and there's snacks everywhere. You can just grab snacks in a bag. And, part of it is also that the food industry does things that I would say are borderline really unethical, making food really highly palatable and stimulating and adding chemicals that are potentially addictive. And we say in eating disorder recovery, no food is bad because we don't want people to binge and restrict them. And at the same time, there are foods that really, really stimulate appetite and desire to keep eating. And that's on purpose. I mean, that's the food industry sort of getting us to keep buying it. So that is something that is problematic. When we talk about overstimulation, there's also like boredom, right? Like we are bored in this society, in Western society. We are so bored, and we have our iPhones and our computers, and we need to be stimulated and stimulated and stimulated. I have a client actually who is bulimic, and she is from a third world country. I don't want to give out too much information, but she's from a third world country where things were a lot harder, so to speak. And she said to me, things were so much easier there because I didn't have time to think, got up, we did what we had to do. There was work, it wasn't easy to find work. When you found work, you worked. Should here, there's way too many choices, and there's too much time to think. I have too much time on my hands, and my family knows about my bulimia, and they say it's because in the United States you have no problems, so you invent problems. you know. So that's what her family said to her. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but we have a lot to think about. We have a lot of this like existential angst, and food and disordered eating can kind of fulfill this need for stimulation in a way. So it's not just the eating that does it, it's also the binge and then being depressed about the binge. So it's the whole cycle of it that, and if you're purging, that's even one step further, where it's the whole cycle of it that sort of uh, creates some stimulation in your life, gives you more of what you're looking for. And the next part on that same vein is the sensory issue, right? I mean, so many of us are looking for sensory experiences, and we are, we play video games, we do extreme sports, we like fast cars, we get drunk, and food is just another thing that does that, that fulfills an intense sensory experience. And binge eating really does that because you're not just eating, you're eating until you're sick, and you are giving yourself an experience that is beyond that of eating for nurturing. I would say that there's not one true reason that people binge eat. There's probably a million and they all come together, but these are the top ones that I see in practice.